Hello, boys and girls. I'm Lucinda Florio. Today on Around and About New Jersey, we're visiting Waterloo Village to learn about an important part of our state's history, New Jersey's Indian heritage. Native Americans were the first inhabitants of New Jersey, and they lived here for thousands of years before Europeans arrived. At one time, there were many Indian villages located around the state. If you could visit one of these villages, you would get a good idea of the Native American way of life. While there are no longer any Indian villages in New Jersey, here at Waterloo, they've recreated one, and today we're going to visit this Indian village and learn about the first New Jerseyans.
What do you think of when I say American Indian? Teepees, totem poles, feathered war bonnets? Well, the Indians in New Jersey had none of these, but their lives were filled with many, many interesting things. For thousands of years before Europeans came, New Jersey was the home of Indians who called themselves the Lenape. Who were the Lenape? What was life like in a Lenape village? And what happened to them? If you'd like to find out about the first New Jerseyans, then come along with me as we go around and about New Jersey. Today on Around and About New Jersey, we're visiting Waterloo Village in Sussex County. Waterloo is located along the Musconetcong River. Waterloo Village was founded in the mid-1700s as an ironworks. They made weapons here for George Washington's army during the Revolutionary War. They also cut wood for lumber at a sawmill, like this one, and used a grist mill to make flour. In the early 1800s, Waterloo Village was a stop on the busy Morris Canal. In those days, iron ore and coal were transported on the canal from Pennsylvania across northern New Jersey to New York City. Today, Waterloo Village is a museum. One of the great things to see is the recreated Lenape Indian Village.
Welcome to the Lenape Indian Village. Len means common, Ape means people. You've studied about them in school? Okay. Well, here comes the
John
big question.
Kraft is the curator and guide of the Lenape Village. He also built the village and made it look like a real one.
Oh, how they lived. Come follow me.
Now, John's not an Indian, nor is any of his staff. So how did John know what a Lenape village looked like? He learned through archaeology.
To our simulated archaeological site. Simulated means that
Archaeologists learn about the past by digging in the ground and carefully studying the objects they find.
Archaeology is all about here in New Jersey. Now,
the deeper they dig, the older the objects they find.
Of history and prehistory. If the farther down you go now, the older things get. If you went down just about 6 inches here, you might find yourself an old wagon wheel or an iron axe back from George Washington's days. But if you decide to dig down just a little bit deeper, you might go back to when the Indians were here, the late woodland Indians, the Lenape that we're going to study about today. But if you go down to this very deepest section, you might even find a mastodon. Many mammoth and mastodon were all walking around New Jersey, and some of the Indians were hunting them. Here we see an Indian.
A very long time ago, as many as 15,000 years, there were no Indians in New Jersey. There may have been no Indians in America at all. Ice covered much of North America. People from Asia crossed into Alaska over a land bridge, and their descendants over years and years spread throughout North and South America. The people who became the Lenape slowly traveled east, reaching what we now call New Jersey about 12,000 years ago. Slowly, the ice melted, and after thousands of years, trees began to grow, and the Lenape ancestors hunted new kinds of forest animals: deer, bear, raccoon, and turkey. Much later, about 1,000 years ago, these Lenape ancestors began growing gardens and living in villages along riverbanks. The Lenape used rivers to fish from the dugout canoes they made by burning out the insides of tree trunks.
Here we are along a river now. Why do you think these Indians might want to live along a river like this? Yes?
Fishing, washing clothes, transportation.
Transportation was one of the very important reasons. See, the Indians could take these dugout canoes that you see all around you, and they would use these for traveling up and down the rivers to visit with other Indian groups. But a really good reason also, these dugout canoes enabled you to take nets like these things here and all kinds of these wonderful fishing spears, and they can go out onto these lakes and they can gather up many of the fish.
In these villages, men and women did different kinds of work. Lenape women were farmers. They planted and harvested vegetables like corn, which was ground into flour. Indians were the first people to grow many vegetables we still eat today: corn, squash, and beans. Women made clay pots and wooden bowls for cooking.
I'm going to try to show you how the Indians made their tools and weapons.
Lenape men hunted and fished. Over the years, the Lenape became skilled at making bows, arrows, and spears for hunting, and nets and sinkers for fishing.
They would make it either into a knife, a spearhead, or what have you.
Men built small bark houses called wigwams.
Houses. Let's talk about them. Now, in the springtime, that was a time to make your house. You would take small trees or saplings, put them down into the ground, and bend them over to make yourself a very sturdy frame. Then what you might want to do is take some bark. We've covered some of the house here, but I'll need another piece. Can you guys give me a hand over there? That's great. Bring that piece right over here, and we'll put that into place. Now, on the inside of some of this bark, you found a stringy stuff called bast. And you can actually tie this bark right onto a frame. In a small house like you see here, maybe one family would live: a mother, a father, a couple of kids. But if you wanted to live together with your, say, sister and her family, or your mother, you might want to make this house a bit longer so you can all fit. A long house.
Several families lived together in a single longhouse. The benches were used as places to sit by day and beds by night. The Lenape believed that everything had a living spirit, including rocks and animals and trees. Before cutting down a tree, a Lenape would first explain to it why. "I'm sorry, but I need your wood for a fire to keep my family warm."
Now, I don't know if I'm going to actually be able to start a fire or not.
We'll come back to our purpose and do that later.
You get a hot cold. Okay, there you go.
How was Lenape life different from yours?
We used matches, lighters, and they had to use wood to start fires and stuff.
We don't live in long houses and things made out of trees.
They have to make things themselves, and we can just go out to the store and buy them.
That's it. All kinds of things here. Come on inside.
For hundreds of years, this was the lifestyle of the Lenape.
Today we're inside of another
Around
house.
1600, the lives of the Lenape changed drastically.
Now, they were quite different than these Indians. They came from Europe, and they didn't have skin clothing or feathers in their hair. They wore something new called cloth. And they brought with them on their ships red blankets, iron pots, axes and knives, glass beads. Now, these are things that these Lenape had never seen before, but really wanted. But what about them? What did they want? Well, they were hungry. They needed some food. But it was the furs that they were after. The Lenape had beautiful fox and mink, deer skins, and especially this one here, beaver. You see, over in Europe, it was the rage at this time to make things like beaver hats. Everybody wanted one. Felt hats. They're made out of fluffy beaver felt. And by bringing thousands and thousands of these furs back with them, these men made a fortune. Now, these Lenape got something from these men that they didn't even ask for, disease. Many of these men were sailors, and they've been all over the world, and they brought to America epidemic diseases that had never been here. Things like smallpox, tuberculosis, cholera, measles, influenza, and even malaria. And by simply trading with these Indians and interacting, they spread their germs. And in a very short while, they managed to wipe out many of these Lenape. Now, take a look at a scene like this, for instance. Even if you came back next year, you might only see 1 or 2 of these people left alive.
Besides disease, the Lenape faced another problem. The Europeans wanted the Indians' lands. After all, fur-bearing animals in the area were killed off. The Lenape began to sell their land for European goods. As more of their people died and more Europeans moved in, the Lenape moved west. Eventually, most of their descendants ended up in Oklahoma, Wisconsin, and Ontario, Canada. There are lots of things that are a part of our lives that originally came from the Indians, including foods we eat, like corn, squash, and beans. There are also Indian place names on our map, like Hackensack, Raritan, and Manahawkin. Can you name any others?
Now, just to make sure you're all awake, do you remember that they stored some of the food up on top of the ceiling? Yeah. Okay, we're getting somewhere. Well, that wasn't quite enough to get them through the long winters. These Indians also...
Visiting Waterloo Village is an exciting way to learn about the Lenape and their way of life. That's important because it helps us to remember that they were the first New Jerseyans. Funding for this program was provided by Beneficial Management Corporation, a subsidiary of Beneficial Corporation, which has been providing banking, insurance, and consumer financial services to America since 1914.